It started with a letter. A thin white envelope with no branding, no return address. Just her name, Emily Carson, printed in block letters that looked as if they had been typed on an old inkjet printer. She almost threw it out with the other junk mail, but something about the formal layout caught her eye. Inside was a notice of overdue payment for a loan with a company she had never heard of. The amount was a little over £1,800, and the document was stamped with bold red lettering. Final warning before legal action. She stared at it for a long time, confused more than worried. Surely this was a mistake. Emily worked as a freelance graphic designer out of a small flat in Brighton. She was methodical, organized, and careful with money. She had one credit card she barely used, no outstanding loans, and a credit score she prided herself on maintaining. She didn't drink, didn't gamble, didn't make rash financial decisions. So the idea that she could be in default over a loan she never applied for felt surreal. She dismissed the letter as a scam at first. It wasn't uncommon to receive phishing attempts. She had seen them before. But 3 days later, another letter arrived, this time from a different loan provider, referencing a separate £5,000 personal loan in her name. Then came a third, this one from a debt collection agency threatening to garnish her wages over a missed payment. The weight in her chest grew heavier. Something was wrong, very wrong. She called each company, prepared to calmly explain the mistake, assuming that once she proved her identity, or lack thereof, the matter would be resolved. But the phone calls didn't go as expected. Each representative confirmed the loan applications were submitted under her full legal name, national insurance number, date of birth, and home address. One company even read back her supposed employment details. Freelance creative contractor at EC Designs, which was indeed her branding. Except, as she would learn later, the attached documentation had come with doctored ID scans. Her driver's license. Only the photo had been altered slightly. The background was a bit too smooth, her face subtly stretched. It looked like a low-resolution print job from a digital manipulation. The rest, name, ID number, address, was all accurate. Emily felt her stomach knot as if someone had stolen not just her name, but her skin, her fingerprints, her reflection. She reported the situation to Action Fraud and filed a case through the National Crime Agency's online portal. They flagged it as a probable case of identity theft and advised her to immediately contact her bank, freeze her credit, and put a fraud alert on her credit file through the major bureaus. It was bureaucratic chaos. Endless forms, phone calls, verification procedures. She lost a freelance client in the middle of it all because she had to cancel a project meeting while sitting at a Barclays branch filing an affidavit. A week later, her bank froze her account after detecting suspicious activity. Someone had tried to transfer £6,500 from one of her savings accounts to a completely new account in her name, one she had never opened. It became clear this wasn't a one-time attack. This was systematic. Whoever did this had access to not only her basic details, but also her habits, her email patterns, perhaps even her digital signature. She felt violated in a way that was deeper than physical. This was the kind of crime that made you question your own autonomy. She dug deeper, pulling up statements, trying to trace where the first breach might have happened. Her laptop was scanned, no malware. Her phone was fine. Her passwords were strong, and she didn't use public Wi-Fi. That's when a data forensics officer working on her case asked her something that startled her. Do you know if anyone close to you, family for instance, has access to your personal documents? Emily hesitated. Her heart sank. She did. Her passport, national insurance card, and even some old bank statements were kept in a folder at her parents' house. She hadn't moved it since she left 5 years ago. It was just sitting there in the drawer of her childhood desk, unprotected, forgotten. Her parents still lived in the same semi-detached house in a quiet suburb outside London, where her younger brother Aaron, now 27, also stayed. He'd had a rough few years, jobless, involved in some shady online gambling, always asking for a quick loan. She had helped him out before, wiring him a few £100s when he claimed his rent was overdue or that he'd lost his wallet. But over time, she started saying no. She couldn't afford to keep rescuing him. Still, she never suspected he would stoop this low. The idea felt repulsive at first. She hated even thinking it. But when she cross-referenced the IP addresses used to apply for some of the loans, as provided by one of the more cooperative lenders, her jaw dropped. The IP geolocation matched their family home. One was made on a Tuesday afternoon, a week after she had visited her parents and used the Wi-Fi. That same day, Aaron had been there. He'd even borrowed her laptop briefly, claiming he needed to check on a job application. She didn't want to believe it. She didn't want to accuse him. But it all lined up. The loan applications were made with information stored at her childhood desk. He had the motive, the opportunity, and now the digital footprint. When she confronted her parents about the situation, the response wasn't what she expected. Her mother grew defensive, her arms crossed as if shielding her son from a physical blow. Aaron's going through a hard time, her mom said. You know that. Don't make things worse. I'm not making things worse, Emily replied sharply. He did. I could go to prison for this. My credit is ruined. My career is hanging by a thread. You think I'm enjoying this? Her father was more measured but still reluctant. Maybe it's someone else. You've had clients from all over. Are you sure it wasn't an outside job? I'm sure, she said. The applications came from your Wi-Fi, from inside this house. Aaron didn't come downstairs during that visit. He stayed in his room, texting their mom. Emily saw the notifications light up on her mother's phone. Later that evening, she received a message from him. I didn't do anything. You're just looking for someone to blame. Leave me out of this. She fell numb. It was like watching a bridge collapse in slow motion. A bridge built over years of shared memories, childhood jokes, late-night confessions. Now reduced to rubble, charred with deception. Emily submitted all the evidence to the police. IP logs, loan documents, copies of the fake ID. She couldn't carry the burden alone. Her identity was bleeding into debt she didn't know. And if she didn't stop him, it could happen again to her or someone else. 3 weeks later, she got a call from Detective Harris. They had issued a warrant. Aaron Carson had been arrested outside a betting shop in Croydon. When they searched his phone, they found email drafts addressed to loan providers, using her name, and templates for fake utility bills. On his laptop were multiple login attempts to her online banking. It was a clear-cut case of identity theft. Emily sat on the edge of her bed that night, staring at the wall. She wasn't sure what she felt. Relief? Anger? Grief? All of them tangled together. Her brother, her own brother, had stolen from her not once, not twice, but over the course of months, wearing her life like a costume, a tool, a convenience. The betrayal cut deeper than any financial damage. And it was only the beginning of what would come next. Emily sat in her living room, clutching her phone long after the call from Detective Harris had ended. Her tea had gone cold, untouched on the side table. Outside, the coastal winds swept across Brighton's narrow lanes. But inside her small flat, everything felt unbearably still. Her brother had been arrested. Not some anonymous scammer, not a foreign hacker, not a random criminal, but Aaron, her own blood. The shame, the shock, the disbelief, they swirled inside her like a storm. She wanted to cry, to scream, to rewind time. But instead, she sat there frozen, her fingers tightening around the phone until her knuckles turned white. The next day, she called her parents. She knew the news had already reached them. Detective Harris had informed her that Aaron was taken into custody just 2 hours earlier. Still, she felt an obligation to speak to them directly. Maybe explain her side, maybe prepare them for the storm that was about to hit their family. Her mother answered on the second ring, her voice already strained. I suppose you're calling to celebrate, she said without greeting. You've finally done it. Emily blinked. Done what? You've destroyed your brother's life. For a moment, Emily couldn't speak. Mom, she said quietly, trying to hold back the sting in her throat. He stole my identity. He took out loans in my name. He committed fraud, serious fraud. He's your brother. Her mother snapped. And you know what he's been through. You think prison is going to help him? You think ruining his future was the only solution? No, Emily said, her voice tightening, but letting him ruin mine wasn't an option either. The call ended with no resolution, just silence and an overwhelming sense of abandonment. Emily had expected some resistance, some attempt at denial, maybe shock, but not this. Not the outright rejection of her pain in favor of his excuses. Her mother acted like Emily was the villain, like she had set Aaron up out of spite or jealousy. She couldn't understand it. How could they not see what he'd done? How could they defend it? Later that evening, her father called. His tone was less confrontational, more somber, but still coated in disappointment. "We should have handled this as a family," he said, "before the police got involved." "I tried," Emily replied. "I showed you the evidence. You refused to believe it." He sighed. "Your mom's not herself lately. She's under a lot of stress." "And I'm not?" Emily asked. "You think it was easy for me to file that report? To hand over everything to investigators? You think I wanted to see him in handcuffs?" There was a long pause. "No," he said finally. "I don't think that." But that was as far as his support went. He didn't ask if she was okay. He didn't offer to help clear her name, or even ask how much damage had been done. The conversation left her feeling more alone than ever. The media coverage was minimal. A single article buried in the local news section. Man arrested for identity theft and loan fraud totaling £18,000. It didn't name her, but it named him, and by extension, it painted a target on her. Old family friends began calling, texting, trying to piece together the story without asking directly. She ignored them all. What hurt most was how divided the family became. Her cousin Julia, whom she'd been close with since childhood, messaged her late one night with a single line: "You should have handled it quietly." Emily stared at the screen in disbelief, as if being quiet would have undone the loans. As if being quiet would have restored her credit score or erased the sleepless nights she endured wondering if the next knock on her door would be a debt collector. The legal process moved quickly. Because the evidence was strong: IP addresses, falsified documents, digital footprints, and his partial confession during questioning. Charges were filed within days. Aaron was granted bail under strict conditions, including a no-contact order with Emily. Despite this, she received a message through a mutual friend. Aaron wanted to meet, just to talk. She refused. She began working with a solicitor, Simon Chandler, who specialized in financial identity recovery. He was kind but blunt. "You did the right thing," he said during their first meeting. "Too many victims try to protect the perpetrator when it's a family member. It only prolongs the damage." Emily nodded, though the words didn't comfort her. Doing the right thing hadn't brought her peace. It had fractured her family, turned her mother cold, her father distant, and her brother into a criminal. Every day, she second-guessed herself, wondering if there had been another way. Simon helped her draft a victim impact statement for the court. In it, she described not just the financial damage, though that was extensive, but the psychological toll. She wrote about the anxiety, the sleeplessness, the breakdown of trust. She wrote about the constant fear that her name, her reputation, had been permanently tarnished. That even after the court ruled in her favor, the digital scars would remain. Meanwhile, Aaron's lawyer reached out with a settlement proposal. If Emily withdrew her complaint, Aaron would agree to repay the full amount, plus a formal apology. She declined. Words and money meant little now. What she wanted was justice, not revenge, but accountability. Still, the guilt gnawed at her. Every time she thought about the sentencing hearing, her stomach twisted. Would he go to prison? Would her parents ever forgive her? Would she ever forgive herself for choosing to protect her identity over her brother's freedom? She poured herself into work, trying to rebuild her client list and recover the contracts she had lost during the chaos. But the stress showed. She forgot deadlines, snapped at people, isolated herself from friends. Even mundane things like logging into online banking triggered anxiety. Each time she typed her login credentials, she double-checked for typos, reread every alert, every notification, every balance update, afraid something had slipped through. One weekend, feeling restless, she drove to the town she grew up in, parked outside her parents' house, and just sat there. She didn't knock. She didn't get out. She watched the windows, the familiar curtains, the faint flicker of the TV light behind the living room glass. It was like staring at a museum version of her past. Untouched, familiar, but completely out of reach. She missed them. She missed the comfort, the warmth. But she also knew it wasn't real anymore. The family she had once trusted had chosen sides, and she wasn't on theirs. That night, as she lay in bed, Emily realized something bitter and freeing. Justice often came at a cost, and sometimes that cost was love. The trial was scheduled for the following month. She would have to appear, testify, and relive everything. But she was ready, not because she wanted vengeance, not because she wanted to see her brother suffer, but because she needed her name back, her life back, and maybe, somewhere down the line, peace. But she knew this chapter wasn't just about exposing Aaron's betrayal. It was about drawing boundaries, about facing the reality that even blood ties could fray when stretched too far. And if no one else would defend her, then she would have to learn how to defend herself, even if it meant standing alone. The day of the trial dawned gray and wet, as if the sky itself carried the weight of what was about to unfold. Emily stood at the courthouse entrance in a dark coat, the collar pulled up against the drizzle, watching people filter inside, some with briefcases, others clutching umbrellas or damp legal folders. She clutched her own handbag tightly, her fingers numb not from the cold but from nerves. No amount of preparation could fully steady her heart. Today she would sit across from her brother in a courtroom, under oath, and testify against him. Inside, the air was sterile and cold. The hall smelled faintly of disinfectant and damp wool. The courtroom was smaller than she'd imagined. Modest rows of benches, plain wood paneling, a judge's desk that didn't seem nearly high enough to carry the emotional weight of what it symbolized. She sat next to her solicitor, Simon Chandler, trying not to fidget as the legal formalities began. Aaron entered last. Her chest tightened at the sight of him. Hair slightly longer than usual, face thinner, eyes shadowed. He was wearing a simple suit, probably borrowed, and his expression flickered with something between resentment and shame when their eyes met. He didn't smile. Neither did she. The prosecution presented first. The evidence was damning. Loan applications, forged ID documents, screenshots of emails Aaron had drafted using her name, metadata proving those messages were sent from his devices, IP logs traced to their parents' home, CCTV footage showing him at ATMs withdrawing cash from the fraudulently obtained accounts. One image even showed him holding a bank card with a photo that looked just enough like Emily to pass, if glanced at quickly. It was all laid bare, methodical, deliberate, unmistakable. Emily's hands trembled as the prosecutor recounted how the scam began. Months of manipulation, borrowing her laptop under false pretenses, accessing old paper documents at their childhood home, creating a web of lies that nearly derailed her financial life. She wanted to look away. She wanted to disappear. But she sat still, swallowing the knot in her throat. When it was her turn to testify, she stepped into the witness box with legs that felt heavier than stone. The judge nodded at her gently. The clerk swore her in, and then it began. She started by explaining who she was, her job, her life, her routine. Then she walked through how the first letter arrived, how the deception unraveled, how it felt to have her name dragged through credit agencies, banks, and legal threats. She explained the sleepless nights, the panic when her bank froze her account, the moment she saw her brother's fingerprints all over the crime. She fought to keep her voice steady, but at times it cracked. The betrayal, more than the fraud itself, sat deepest in her words. "I didn't want to believe it was him," she said, looking straight ahead, her eyes fixed on the judge. "For weeks, I blamed myself. Thought maybe I'd lost some documents or been hacked. But when it all led back to Aaron, I still gave him a chance. I brought it to my family first. No one listened. No one believed me. I didn't do this to ruin his life. I did to take back mine." The judge listened attentively, occasionally jotting notes. Aaron's lawyer, a middle-aged man named Colin Blake, stood to cross-examine her. His approach was cautious, not combative. "Miss Carson, would you agree that your brother has been struggling financially for some time?" he asked. "Yes," she said simply. "And did you ever help him with money?" "I did, until I realized I was enabling him." Is it possible he believed he would repay the money and simply didn't realize the full extent of the harm? "No, Emily interruptive. He applied for multiple loans in my name. Over £18,000 in debt. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a decision. Repeated, calculated decisions. There was a pause before Blake nodded and sat down. The defense didn't call Aaron to the stand. Instead, Blake delivered a closing argument aimed at minimizing sentencing. He cited Aaron's previous clean record, his misguided desperation, and the possibility of rehabilitation. He spoke of addiction, mental health, and family pressure. Emily didn't deny any of it. She knew Aaron had struggled, but so had she, and she hadn't resorted to destroying someone else's life to cope with it. The courtroom recessed briefly before reconvening for closing remarks and sentencing. Emily's heart pounded in her ears as the judge reviewed the facts. The tone was firm but fair. He acknowledged Aaron's circumstances but emphasized the gravity of the crime. Identity theft is not just a financial offense. It robs a person of their agency, their credibility, their peace of mind. And in this case, it was committed by someone who should have been a source of trust. The judge handed down a sentence of 2 years in prison, with eligibility for parole after 1 year, and ordered Aaron to pay restitution of £10,000 to Emily over a structured period. The courtroom was silent except for the scratch of pens and the occasional cough. Aaron stood still, eyes down, as the sentence was read. Emily didn't cry. She didn't feel victorious, just exhausted. When the hearing ended, she walked out without looking back. Her parents weren't there. No one waited for her outside. She took the long way home, walking through the city until the rain washed away the weight of the courtroom. The pain hadn't left her, but for the first time in months, she felt the beginnings of something close to closure. In the following days, the media reached out. She declined interviews. She didn't want to be the face of family betrayal. Instead, she quietly began the process of rebuilding. Her solicitor helped her with paperwork to repair her credit file. It would take time, months, maybe years, but the process had begun. The banks, now satisfied with the court ruling, began removing the fraudulent loans. Debt collectors backed off. Her financial breath returned, slowly. And emotionally, she began to exhale too. She reconnected with a few friends she'd pushed away during the chaos. One afternoon, her old university friend Maya invited her for coffee, and for the first time, Emily found herself able to talk about the ordeal without crying. She even laughed a little when she joked, "Next time someone borrows my laptop, I'm going to run a background check first." But despite the external improvements, the internal wounds remained. She still flinched when the phone rang with an unknown number. She still avoided her parents' neighborhood. Her mother had sent her a short email after the sentencing. "You didn't have to let it go this far." No apology, no warmth, just bitterness. Emily never responded. Her father wrote separately. His email was gentler. He didn't defend Aaron, but asked Emily if she would consider visiting sometime. She didn't delete it, but she didn't reply either. Not yet. One day, a letter arrived in the post. Handwritten, no return address, but the handwriting was familiar. It was from Aaron. Inside, the letter was brief. "I know you won't believe anything I say. I don't blame you. I don't expect forgiveness. But I'm sorry. I really am. I don't know why I did it. Only that I was drowning, and I grabbed you like a life raft without thinking what I'd do to you in the process. I'm going to pay back every penny. I know it won't fix anything, but I owe you that much. I owe you everything." She read it twice. Then she folded it and tucked it away in a drawer. She didn't cry. Not that time. The legal chapter was closed. The consequences had been delivered. But healing, she realized, was not something a courtroom could grant. That would have to come slowly, through time, reflection, and her own willingness to let go. Not of the memory, but of the anger tied to it. Aaron would serve his time. She would rebuild hers. It wasn't the ending she had wanted, but it was a beginning she could live with. The months that followed Aaron's sentencing passed like a long exhale after holding in breath too long. At first, Emily didn't feel triumphant. There was no celebratory moment, no surge of vindication, just stillness, the kind that settled in after a storm has passed and all that remained was damp earth and broken branches. But within that stillness was something else, too, a space she hadn't felt in a long time, a space for herself. Her first priority was reclaiming her financial identity. and she approached it with quiet determination. With Simon's guidance, she filed extensive paperwork with each lender that had issued fraudulent loans. The court judgment made the process easier, but not instant. Each institution had its own set of rules, and Emily had to endure long calls, slow bureaucratic responses, and repeated retellings of her story to strangers who showed polite sympathy but had no stake in her pain. One bank required her to visit a branch in person with court documents and a notarized statement. Another asked her to submit a detailed timeline of every transaction in question. It was tedious, infuriating at times, but she didn't stop. She tracked everything: loan reference numbers, case IDs, claim statuses. Her kitchen table became a battlefield of manila folders, sticky notes, and printed emails. And slowly, line by line, her credit record began to repair itself. She also enrolled in an identity monitoring service, something she once thought unnecessary. Now she read every alert with the scrutiny of a detective. The sense of vulnerability hadn't gone away, but she was learning how to protect herself, digitally, emotionally, financially. It felt like pulling shards out of a wound, one by one. Work, too, had to be rebuilt. The damage from losing clients during the investigation had left a hole in her income, and for a while she struggled to meet rent and utility bills. But Emily had always been resourceful. She reached out to past clients, offered discounted rates to restart contracts, and updated her portfolio with new samples. She also took on some freelance agency work, less creative, more rigid, but it helped pay the bills. Over time, her schedule filled again. Her confidence, fragile after months of self-doubt, began to return. She reconnected with a local business network she used to be active in, even attending a few evening meetups. At one of them, she gave a short talk about personal branding and creative integrity. When someone later complimented her clarity and strength, Emily smiled, not out of pride, but out of a quiet, earned recognition. I'm still me. Emotionally, the recovery was less straightforward. Aaron wrote her 2 more letters from prison. The second was longer, more introspective. He spoke about group therapy sessions, about learning to take responsibility, about how he never understood the full weight of what he had done until hearing other inmates share how they had ruined their families. He didn't ask for forgiveness again. He just said he would keep writing until she told him not to. She didn't respond, but she didn't tear the letters up either. She placed them in the same drawer with the first one, telling herself she wasn't ready to read them a second time yet. Maybe one day. Her parents remained distant. Her mother had completely withdrawn from contact, refusing even to send a birthday message that year. It hurt deeply, but Emily had stopped trying to fix what clearly didn't want to be mended. Her father, though, sent a brief text every few weeks. Never about Aaron, just small things. Hope work's going okay, or weather's getting colder, stay warm. It was his way of reaching out without addressing the wound. She accepted it. She even responded, sometimes. It was enough for now. Despite the silence, Emily couldn't shake the memories of who they used to be as a family. Birthdays spent laughing around the table. Aaron as a mischievous kid who loved pranking her, her mother humming in the kitchen. Those images haunted her, not because they were gone, but because they had been real. And now she had to live with the knowledge that love and betrayal could exist in the same house, sometimes even in the same person. In the summer, she decided to take a short trip, a solo weekend to Cornwall. She booked a small seaside Airbnb, packed her sketch pad and a few books, and let herself unwind. On the second morning, sitting on a bench overlooking the cliffs, she pulled out her phone and scrolled through old photos. One came up of her and Aaron, taken 3 years prior. They were both smiling, side by side at a cousin's wedding. She studied his face. It was impossible to reconcile that version of him with the man who forged her name to steal money. And yet, they were the same person. She closed the gallery and opened a blank page in her notes app. Then she began to write, not to Aaron, not to the court, not to anyone else, just to herself. He betrayed me, but I survived. He stole from me, but I rebuilt. He shattered our family, but I'm still here, stronger, wiser, not bitter, just awake. She sat back, letting the wind brush her hair, And for the first time in what felt like years, she smiled without effort. By early autumn, her life had stabilized. She had a consistent income again, her debts were cleared, and her credit score, though still marked by a few lingering notes, was climbing steadily. Her landlord agreed to renew her lease without raising the rent. Her nights were quiet again. No more frantic calls. No more frozen accounts. No more living on the edge of collapse. One morning, she received a letter not from Aaron, but from the prison's restitution office. Inside was a check, pound 350, the first installment from Aaron's prison job. It wasn't much, but it was real, evidence that he was, in some way, trying. She stared at it for a long while before depositing it, not because she needed the money, but because she wanted that chapter to end honestly. She never told anyone about the moment that followed, when she sat down after depositing the check and cried. Not out of pain, but out of release, out of the sheer weight of everything finally shifting. The grief, the anger, the sense of betrayal. It hadn't disappeared, but it had changed shape. It was no longer a bleeding wound. It was scar tissue, sensitive but healed. A few weeks later, she sent her father an email. It was short. Tell Mom I'm doing well. You don't have to explain anything. Just let her know I'm okay. His reply came 3 days later. She heard. She cried. I hope one day we can all talk again. I'm proud of how strong you've been, Em. Truly. That night, Emily lit a candle in her window, not as a symbol of waiting, but as a reminder to herself that light can return to even the darkest spaces. She didn't know if she and Aaron would ever speak again. She didn't know if her mother would ever accept her decision. But she did know one thing with certainty. She had fought for her name, her truth, and her dignity. And she had won, not because her brother was behind bars, but because she was no longer afraid to take up space, to speak up, to protect herself. In the end, the story wasn't just about betrayal. It was about reclamation, of her finances, of her future, of herself. And in that quiet victory, Emily found peace. Not perfect, not wrapped in a bow, but real. And that was enough.